Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the second of two parent forums hosting the two finalists for the position of Superintendent Director here at Shawshene Tech. This event is being held live on February 10th. It is about 3:30 p.m. If you are watching live at home or at the office or wherever, if you have questions that you would like posed to the candidate, you can email them to questions, questions, @shawtech.org, and they will, and I'll ask them on your behalf. Um, and this and the YouTube video of the other candidate are on the Shawshene Tech's Superintendent Search webpage for people to watch at their leisure. A reminder that the school committee is seeking parental feedback on these candidates, and there's a form on that same search superintendent search webpage that where people can enter their information, their input confidentially without providing any specific information, self-identifying information. So with that, I'd like to get tonight started, or this afternoon started, by introducing Mr. Brad Morgan, who is the second of two finalists for the position of Superintendent Director here at Shawshene Tech. Brad, welcome to Shawshene Tech.
Thank you.
If you could start things off tonight just by telling, or this afternoon, by telling everybody a little bit about yourself.
Sure. So thank you everyone for coming. Certainly my pleasure to be here this afternoon. Just a little bit about me. I am currently 3.5 years into my superintendency at the North Middlesex Regional School District, which is a 3-town school district made up of Pepperell, Townsend, and Ashby. About 3,100 kids, 7 schools, a pre-K, 3 elementary schools, 2 middle schools, and then a brand new high school. I've been doing that for 3.5 years. Prior to that, I spent 8 years in a combination position of being the high school principal at North Shore Technical High School in Middleton. And then we merged into what is now Essex Agricultural and Technical High School in Danvers. And I took on that position for 4 years. Essentially, North Shore Technical, where I was principal, Peabody Vocational, and Essex Agricultural merged into one school district, becoming Essex Agricultural and Technical High School. And I, again, served as principal there, was a part of the building process, the CTE approval process for many new programs that we opened up there, and a part of the design team and building committee there. Again, for 8 years. So that was a great experience for me. It truly gave me the opportunity to build a culture from the ground up, because it was 3 different cultures coming together, and also gave me a great deal of experience in collective bargaining, because we had 3 different collective bargaining groups coming together, one of which was AFT and 2 were MTA, and we merged those into one contract relatively quickly, and did a lot of team building amongst the staff, again, where many of them did not know each other. Prior to that, I was a middle school principal in Waltham and had a couple of assistant principalships, but began my career in education in Chelmsford, where I was a 7th and 8th grade social studies teacher. Also taught at the high school in the alternative night school program for students that were looking to get a certificate of completion as opposed to a high school diploma. And currently reside in Chelmsford. I was born and raised in Chelmsford. I'm married. My wife is an evaluation team chair for the Lowell Public Schools. And I have 3 daughters. My oldest just graduated from Keene State in May. My middle daughter is a junior at the University of Tampa. And my youngest daughter is an 8th grader at the Parker Middle School in Chelmsford. So very happy to be here tonight, or this afternoon, I should say, and answer your questions.
Well, it must seem like tonight, because you've been here for quite a while today, visiting our classrooms and meeting with students and staff members. Just before I open it up to the folks here, just to get things started, why don't you just give us a little bit of your impressions of Shawshene Tech after you've spent your day here?
Sure. So again, growing up in Chelmsford, I was always well aware of the reputation that Shawshene had. Really is just a top career and technical high school in the state of Massachusetts. And having the opportunity to meet with the administrative team, the students, and then the faculty and staff moments ago, that really rang true again. The students are thrilled to be here. It was a pleasure talking with them. It was like talking to really a group of young professionals. They were very complimentary of their school, and they had some good feedback on things that they would like to see potentially changed as well. Something as simple as changing the 2 years of biology to accommodate the MCAS test in the 10th grade, which is unfortunate. But again, that's something that, they were actually bringing up state level problems, which was impressive to me. Meeting with the faculty and staff a few moments ago, again, a very engaged group of professionals. You can feel the passion being in the room. I learned that many of them graduated from the school. Many of their colleagues graduated from the school as well. Not all of them were here. So that says a lot when faculty and staff come back to the building that they graduated from to work in the same building. It shows, again, a level of commitment, and obviously that they had a good experience here. Administrative team is the same thing, just a lot of positive things. But what was most impressive today was having the opportunity to walk through academic and career and technical classes and see real engagement in every instructional space that I walked into, which again goes a lot. It says a lot about the teaching staff in this building, both the career and technical and the academic. The fact that when you walked in, teachers pulled away to talk to me and to meet me, and the students continued working. They were fully engaged. They did not look up and continued working, which again says a lot about the routines that they're used to and the expectations of their classroom teachers. So it was very impressive. Great visit today.
Great. Thank you so much. Questions from our group here today?
I guess I'll
I
start.
would say one of us will break the ice. I'll start. I have two questions. I'll ask one at a time because I don't want to be too long-winded. So, although we do need content for an hour. So I have one question for you. I used to work in education, so I know how many decisions are made sometimes externally or internally, and the parents get a last minute kind of ditch effort. So when I think it's great when people come from the same culture. I think it's great when they come back to a culture. I also understand nepotism, and I understand what happens when, we have you're either with us or against us attitude. So I guess my question is, what is as a superintendent, your role is really to adhere to regulation and make sure the school is operating under regulation and standards and law. So I guess my question is, what is your understanding of parental and student involvement? And what are your personal feelings on parental and student involvement in the just overall building-based decision making in this building?
Sure. So as far as parents go, and I'll say parents and caregivers, I work hard to involve the parents and to maintain open lines of communication. I do put out weekly newsletters to keep the community and parents and caregivers fully informed. I also hold monthly coffees with parents so that I can hear feedback. And it's not just for parents, it's for community members as well. And that allows me to gauge what the parents are thinking about how things are going at Shawsheen. What's working well from their point of view, what's not working so well. So I think the coffees have been extremely beneficial to me. I've held them when I was a principal in Waltham and at Essex and North Shore, and I hold them now monthly at North Middlesex as well. Something that I've found to be more beneficial is actually holding them virtually because the attendance is better when I hold the coffees virtually. So it allows me to get real-time feedback from the parents who are oftentimes hearing things from their children. So very beneficial. I also like to get parents engaged, if at all possible, in after-school activities, boosters, Skills USA, any type of fundraising volunteerism, excuse me. So again, parents feel like they're a part of the community. It's really a three-point triangle. You have the school, the students, and the parents. and you don't want to fracture within those 3 points. You want to make sure that all 3 points are together in order to give the student the best opportunity for success. So I provide opportunities for parents to be involved. Ultimately, it is on the parents. I very rarely get a tremendous amount of parent involvement at the high school level. I always had it at the middle school level, and I know that parent involvement is quite high in my current district at the elementary level, but it does seem to drop off. And I think oftentimes that's more due to the students, not necessarily, maybe wanting their parents to be involved. But the students that don't have a problem with it, and the parents, the students that may have a problem with it, but their parents are going to be involved anyway, I think you do the best you can to involve them in the school community because they are a part of it. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, also, I forgot school councils. Parents also play a significant role in the school council, which is generally run by the building principal and obviously communicated with me.
Hi, I'm Doreen Healy.
Hi.
My 2 boys graduated from here in 09 to 2013.
Okay.
But I love the community. I special ed advocate for many families. But I'm very involved in knowing what's going on in the school because it's my community and I love it. Sometimes it's not, pretty much, I'm not invited to that part, I guess, because sometimes some people here feel that I have no ties. Like I was told by the superintendent and Mr. Jackson that I have no ties to the school, which I do have ties. But how would you feel about, my first question is pretty much involved, like you might have said part of it, parents and guardians, but with community, how would you involve the community? And my second question is what do you think about special ed in a vocational school with more inclusion instead of putting the kids down lower and having more inclusion in the classrooms?
Sure.
And supporting the vocational teachers too, because that support just doesn't help the kids, it helps the staff. And I don't think we've had a lot of that in the past few years prior to my kids.
Sure. So to answer the first part of your question, when I was a building principal and directly overseeing a school council, we always had a community member on the council. You have to ensure the equal representation between the parent community and then the staff side to ensure that you're getting equal distribution of input with regard to the school improvement plan and things of that nature. So there would be a spot for a community member, and if the teachers don't fill up the other spots, there may be spots for more than one community member on the school improvement council. As far as special education support was it just the career and technical areas, or was it in academics as well? Both, because of the kids moving down a level?
It's actually in both because
Okay.
we transition from the 5 towns. The IEPs look so different sometimes, or you hear we don't do that.
Sure.
And it's really upsetting because in the past, prior to the special ed director, there's a lot of issues. So it is getting resolved, but I'm just wondering what you feel the support would look like with you coming in here.
So for me, it's twofold. You need one of two things based on my conversations with the administrative team today. You have to look at it one of two ways. First way is right now, there's the inability to provide special education support in many of the academic classes and the CTE classes because of the current schedule and the fact that it's an 8-block day. There was talk about potentially looking at that schedule, which would free up many of those staff members to provide support. So I think first and foremost, you have to do everything you possibly can to follow through with getting the kids support. It's not as simple as just moving a student down a level. And there was also from the administrative team the talk about looking at the number of levels, because 6 is a lot. 6 levels is a lot of levels to have. That would be different for me. So I think you have to look at the number of levels, make sure that you want everything in reality to be college prep, and you want as much inclusion as you can possibly have, but you have to make sure that it's a budget priority. So for me, from a budget standpoint, I always budget for contingency money. And the contingency money generally is used for, and that's almost an emergency fund, but it's targeted towards a couple of things. First, not special ed, regular education transportation, because you don't necessarily know what that's going to look like when the budget gets passed, at least in the district that I am in. Health insurance, what is that going to look like? That could come in at a cost. What is hiring going to look like? We always budget for particular positions, but to get the most qualified candidate, you don't always necessarily come in at budget. And then number 4 is special education. And something that I've noticed with special education, just because of the way career and technical schools work as part of the admissions process, is that you generally don't know what the freshman class needs are until they come through the door. So you have to have contingency money in place. If you have a student that comes in a wheelchair, you have to make sure that you have appropriate furniture in the cafeteria and in the classrooms. And that is, again, why you have contingency money in the budget. If you don't spend the contingency money on any of those 4 things or other things that are unknowns, I guess, when the budget gets passed, then the money just gets turned back and it's not used. But I try to budget it so that it's transparent to the 5-member towns. It's transparent to the town managers, board of selectmen, and finance committees, but it's also transparent to the 5 sending district superintendents. So I think it's very important. As far as the career and technical end of it, something that we did at Essex Tech was that we worked to bring on paraprofessionals that had an expertise in that career area, because some of the career areas, as we know, can be dangerous. There could be some safety issues. So oftentimes we used it almost as a way for potential teachers to get their foot in the door, where students that had graduated 5-6 years ago that now wanted to teach and get their teaching license, we would bring them back into carpentry or electrical or plumbing or whatever the current technical area was, hire them as a paraprofessional, give them some experience working with kids. And then, but they would also have the career area skills to work with the students, because simply putting a paraprofessional, an academic paraprofessional in an electrical shop is not necessarily going to work. So you're better off getting a paraprofessional in place that has some background in order to do it. And we were able to do that very successfully at the current technical school that I was at. Wasn't always easy, and in some cases we did have some academic, I'll call them academic paraprofessionals in career and technical areas. But the support is essential. You have to follow through with the IEPs. It's also a very important part of the exploratory process, because where it's rubric based, you do not want a situation where someone comes forward and says the accommodations and modifications were not supplied while my child was going through exploratory and they did not get their first, second, or third choice. So you have to do everything you possibly can, but the schedule is part of it, it sounds like, but also making it a budgetary priority would also be very important to make sure that there's special education support in the classrooms, in the career areas, and there's inclusion.
No, I have a comment. I just want to thank you because you obviously get it. And
No.
I love this school, and I am so happy sitting here listening to you. So
Can
I
I
just want to
ask-
say that to you, but
Can I
thank you
ask
so
you
No,
a
much.
thank you.
question about that, though?
Sure.
Because I haven't, so first of all, my nephew goes to your school district.
Mhm.
He's a basketball player, he's a senior, and then I have one that's a junior. Secondly, I'm an educator by trade. I have a license in curriculum and instruction and literacy. I've taught at Acton Boxborough, running their child development program for 1 year, so I get some piece of this technical thing. My question is, how do you cover the internship mentorship program for people who don't understand teacher licensure? I don't understand the technical license, but doesn't that paraprofessional, if they're gonna become a teacher, don't they need to have some time in a classroom under a mentor teacher in a kind of advisement for a year to earn their licensed as an educator
So there's, for a paraprofessional?
to move into teaching?
Oh, yes.
Or if you're taking them in-
Absolutely, yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So they would have to move into general ed at some point?
No,
No.
they would have to take the VTELs and be able to prove content area proficiency in their trade.
What about time in the classroom, though? They don't need to spend time in an academic room?
In an academic room, no.
Okay,
No.
all right. I wasn't clear on the
No.
process. Okay.
There isn't a student teaching program per se in the
Okay.
career and technical side of on the current
That was
technical
my
side of the house.
All right.
You do have MAVA programming, and they expect you to take, I believe it's 6 courses right now
Okay.
within the first couple of years of employment.
So let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about some of your educational philosophies. Talk to us a little bit about your philosophy of the role of technology in instruction.
So technology instruction can be very beneficial provided the staff have been trained on how to use it. Oftentimes, without proper training, students end up with a Chromebook or a laptop or an iPad in front of them, and proper training has not been provided to the staff, which makes it you're not optimizing the equipment, making sure that it's being used to an optimal level, and obviously making sure that the students are on task, and that there is proper programs put into place so that students are actually on task when they're in the classrooms and not being able to search and go off task and do things that they that put them off task, so to speak. But I think technology, obviously, they have everything at their fingertips, a tremendous amount of access to information, but you have to make sure that the staff is trained in how to use it, and that there's professional development, and that there's also acceptable use policies that are in place to make sure that it's being optimized in the classroom. Otherwise, it is not beneficial. The training has to be put in place, and policies have to be put in place to ensure that it's going to be used effectively.
Other
But
questions?
again, workshop wise, so you can always lead a horse to water. I used to be a reading instructor, so every year we have the same training on how to implement a certain evaluation, but yet it was, sometimes you speak in and you can't, you can lead them to water, you can't make them drink. So once you do the training, do you ever follow up a training with, how to implement the training, how to make sure that they're staying on track with implementing it? Like now that we kind of gave it to you, does anybody need backup training or a second, like how do you make
Sure.
sure that follow through with we trained you, now are you using the training?
So the training, first and foremost, would likely be multi-step. It would not be, I'm not an advocate for a one and done type professional development. There are some where it will satisfy a requirement or will satisfy a mandate from the Department of Ed, but oftentimes workshops that are going to directly impact learning and impact teaching are a multi-step process. And something like technology, I'd be willing to bet that there are some pretty strong teachers in this building that could share how they use technology at a faculty meeting, something along those lines, so that then they're sharing best practices with their colleagues. But I think you have to make sure that that if you put something in place, that the training is over a period of time. It's set up so that it's going to meet the needs of our teachers, and some of the teachers, based on their program, are going to have different needs. And then you would have to make it part of their educator goals when you're doing observations and evaluations. And then that automatically embeds it into what they need to do and what they would essentially, whether or not they're meeting their goals and meeting the criteria of the 4 objectives. How is technology being used? And if it's, just hitting one of their 3 SMART goals, how is that SMART goal being addressed? If it's just hitting one element in one of the four areas of educator evaluation, how is that element being addressed? But that immediately makes it so that you're able to follow up and ensure that it's happening in the classroom. Does that answer your question?
It does.
Okay.
Absolutely.
So one of the unique things about working in a CBTE environment such as Shawsheen is, as a regional school district, We bring together students from, in this case, as you know, 5 communities. And as a regional superintendent yourself, you know that the relationships between and among communities as part of a region can sometimes be complex and challenging. So how do you go about, as a superintendent, creating relationships with your member districts, whether that be in a CBTE environment or in your case at North Middlesex currently, to ensure that the districts, that those lines of communication are open and that
Sure.
everybody's kind of on the same page?
Sure. So part of my entry plan, and I say entry plan, that's just the first step. But part of my entry plan is going out and establishing relationships with the 5 member district town managers, Board of Selectmen, FinCom, and the 5 sending district superintendents, and high school principals. Middle school principals. I already have relationships with 4 of the 5 sending district superintendents. So that would just be building upon those relationships and establishing one with the 5th that I don't have a working relationship with. But I think you have to get out into the community. You have to get out into the community to meet the town officials, the school officials. They have to get to know you. You do that through having, as I talked about in my budgeting, by having budget summits. The regional budgeting process can be complex, and it's not always easily understood. So making sure that your constituents, your 5 member districts, and the town officials and school officials have an understanding of what the budget looks like, and starting that process early on. In my current district and previously at Essex Tech, I held 4 of those budget summits beginning in either October or November, depending upon how the calendar fell. And then I would have one, say, October, November, December, January, and then present the budget to school committee in February. That's the current timeline that I'm on in my district. So the public hearing is February, it gets approved or not approved in March. So I start the process pretty early on with the member towns, but I want them to understand why our budget is what it is, why I'm advocating what I'm advocating for. But I also do a lengthy budget message, which kind of brings to life the line item budget. It's a lengthy narrative that explains the budget, explains the process, explains explains my asks, but it also has the rationale. It explains any increases or decreases, but it also has the rationale. So you're able to match that up to the line item budget. And I think that's very important with building a relationship, is making sure that everyone understands the budgeting process and how the money is being spent, because it is a different setup in a career technical school. It's very, very different than in a comprehensive district. Also think it's important to get out to the community and try to ensure that our students have adequate co-op opportunities. Make sure that our program advisory members are involved in that process as well, and to lean heavily on them to allow us to make connections with community members. Also look at establishing relationships with the community to come into the school and provide career day type things and things of that nature. Again, to try to build interest in our career and technical areas, and to try to market them beyond what the teachers are already doing, what the guidance and other staff are already doing. But it's almost like a roadshow. You have to get out. You have to get out of your office. You have to get out of the school, and you have to get out and meet people and establish relationships. Relationships are key to me.
Thanks. Other questions?
I'll think of one.
I'm just here as an observer.
How do you feel, and I don't even know if you know we do this, but we have the support service director and the head of guidance as one position.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally feel like that's a lot to put on one person, especially when we had so many issues with special ed a year and a half, 2 years ago, and we're trying to resolve that. Do you think that's a good, where you came from? I guess, like, what is
Sure.
the input about, because we have a high number of special ed kids in the school.
Right. So I think a lot of it comes down to the support structure that's in place and what that person has. In my current district, we do have a director of student services who is in charge of special education, guidance, and health services, being the school nurses. It's a big job, but he also has an assistant director of special education and an evaluation team leader under him. But it is 7 buildings. There are lots of districts that have a director of PPS, which would also be those 3 areas again, in some cases more. It really depends on on the support and the structure in the current building. And for me, I would need time with the director here to find out what the workload is like. Is it manageable? Is it not manageable? And then take it from there. I mean, I know right now that things would likely be smoother in special education if there was more support, but the schedule seems to be prohibiting that right now. So what does that job look like when some of those issues of a lack of support in some of the classes disappear if the schedule changes, if that makes sense. But it's really looking at the whole picture and then, making sure that the person has the support. Are they able to do the job? And if not, do we have to look at potentially splitting the position up again? I would just need time.
Yeah, no, I just figured out.
Kind of to piggyback what she's saying, when you talk about supports, I mean, I would guess that would include, because we know when we look at student discipline, right, that we can almost always say, you'd have to look at the student data, but I'm comfortable saying that, we tend to suspend, and there needs to be some looking at how we manage discipline, because there's an overlap of high risk, high needs kids and over disciplining those students. So when you say it's hard for special education to support, part of that is also making sure that the discipline policies are reviewed every year with parent and student involvement. And that when you have a discipline process, that discipline process is always overseen by an administrator with an administration license, especially if the person listed as that administrator, that's the title at one point, especially online, that this is an administrator. Because this person is doing things called investigations, there are outcomes, and there are things decided and conversations had before an administrator gets involved. So, I guess, and there's movement to get an administrator involved there, and I'm very, very thankful for that, because I think that's necessary, because I think, again, when you have a teacher making a decision between a teacher and a student, and those two teachers are in a teachers union together, I think we can make an assumption, though, even when we want to be as fair as we possibly can, sometimes a third party is necessary to ensure that fairness, right?
Okay.
That you're not coming with even if it's subconscious, right?
Right.
So I guess, my question is, what is your philosophy, pedagogy on student discipline?
So I can't say I'm familiar with a situation where someone without an administrative license is suspending students. I can certainly see situations where teachers are giving detentions, demerits, whatever they happen to be called in a particular school, having a student stay after school because of classroom misbehavior or something along those lines. So I would have to, do some homework on that and figure out, is it happening? Why is it happening? And is there a better way? But my philosophy on student discipline is always, unless student safety is an issue, if a student puts someone's safety at risk, to avoid suspension and look at other types of things we can do instead, which oftentimes, in my current district, we do Saturdays once a month for 4 hours. We do there's the potential to have the students with parent permission to do a work detail. We don't call them community service because they're being forced to do it because they've violated the student handbook. But we look for alternatives to avoid suspension, because the suspension is only going to put the student further behind. Especially, try to avoid suspension when it's not a student safety issue, and look for other alternative ways to provide a consequence that isn't necessarily discipline. Does that answer your question?
It does. And what if the student's already on an IEP for behavior? What would be the response then?
Well, you'd have to determine if it's, if they're behaving in the manner in which they did because it's related to their disability. So, that's something that would be, discussed with guidance, potentially the special education team, to see if in fact the behavior is tied to the disability, which would be mandated anyway once you get to the manifestation determination phase.
So I just wanted to remind folks who may be watching this at home live, it is about 5 minutes past 4:05 p.m. on February 10th. And if you are watching this live, you have about 10 more minutes if you'd like to submit a question by emailing questions at questions@shawtech.org. And I actually, as I say that, at 4:03 p.m., I got a question from an email account. If hired, will you remain with Shawsheen long-term, or do you see yourself using it as a stepping stone?
Sure. So to answer that question, I've had other opportunities to apply here at Shawsheen. The last two opportunities didn't match up for me. The first time was after Mr. Lyons retired, and I was just beginning the process. It was over the summer of opening Essex Tech, the brand new school. I couldn't do it. It just would not have been. It just wasn't the right time. The last time was when Mr. Jackson was hired, and I was just wrapping up. I was in my first year of my superintendency, so it was not the right time. However, something that I realized over the last 3.5 years was how much I missed being in a career and technical high school. I miss it a great deal, and as I mentioned before, Shawsheen has got an incredible reputation, and it's always had an incredible reputation in the Merrimack Valley and statewide, to be honest with you. Oftentimes, much of what other schools have done has been done because of the way Shawsheen does it. There's a great deal of respect statewide about Shawsheen. I've reached a point in my career where I've got somewhere between 7 to 10 years left, and I have not applied for other jobs. This is the only job I've applied for. I'm currently under contract. This could be my last opportunity to apply to Shawsheen, because the next person that gets it could be here beyond that window that I have. So if I get the position, to me, there is no stepping stone. There would be nowhere else to go. I would be committing myself and would be happy to commit myself to the position for as long as I'm continuing to be actively employed as an educator in the state of Massachusetts, which again is somewhere in the 7 to 10 year timeframe.
So let's talk about that 10-year time frame and talk a little bit maybe about vision. Where do you see CVT education going over the next decade?
So I think there's clearly a shortage. There's clearly a shortage of a skilled labor force in the state of Massachusetts. There is a need for more spaces in career and technical education, which is one of the main reasons why the admissions policy has been looked at, because a lot of students are coming to career and tech schools and they're not continuing on. They're going off to college or they're doing something else. So career and tech, the need for a skilled labor force is not going to go away. If anything, it's only going to increase. Right now, the state of Massachusetts has got the luxury of a tremendous amount of support from the governor, from the Secretary of Education, whether it be, their visits to schools, they're talking the schools up, or the fact that the career and tech schools are getting a tremendous amount of grants right now. I'm not sure how long that's going to last, but the support is there. I think that there's going to be more expansion. I think that Shawsheen in particular is really ripe for expansion. I mean, one area that is not necessarily served well across the state is construction craft, and the need for workers that are going to work on our highways and bridges. And that is an approved CTE area now that other schools have. So looking to, again, provide students with the opportunity to become a construction craft laborer, where they come to school here, they go out and work with the union for a period of time, and then they end up with a really, really strong job with great benefits, union benefits, in an area where, quite honestly, there's not a workforce right now. There just aren't enough people. There are also other areas where expansion could occur in other career tech areas, and that was something I was a part of when the new building opened at Essex Tech. We added multiple new programs, so I'm familiar with the approval process with the state. So to me, it's going to continue to grow. I think what needs to be determined here at Shawsheen is, does something need to take place here at this facility? It is tight. Do the teachers, knowing that you have Minuteman and Lexington, you have Essex Technical and Agricultural High School, and then you have Whittier, and those are both brand new, beautiful buildings. And then you have Whittier and Northeast Metro Tech that are in the pipeline for an MSBA project. You know, the buildings are meant to last 50 years. This building has exceeded that 50-year time frame. The building's in great shape. It's exceptionally clean. And the staff here does an excellent job, clearly, at what I saw today, at maintaining and making the best use out of their space. But if a project is going to be considered here, that takes 7 to 10 years. That's a long process. And in 7 to 10 years, you know, this building is going to be older. And to me, the support's there now. It's something worth exploring. You know, I've heard today that this building is accepting more students than it really can hold. And that shows the need, obviously, of trying to satisfy the needs of those students and the desires of those students into the career and tech world. So, you know, to me, you do everything you can to make sure that the staff has appropriate space, has the appropriate facility, and has the appropriate equipment to provide our staff and students with the very best educational institution that we can provide them with. So I think the opportunity is there for expansion. I think career and tech is going to continue to be strong for many, many years moving forward.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions from folks here this afternoon?
Yeah, I have one last one. What is, sorry, one last question. What would your, I mean, I know obviously relationship with the school committee, but how involved do you get with the school committee and with the student reps on the school committee?
So as far as the school committee, I would be maintaining regular communication with the school committee. I know right now I communicate with my chair quite regularly. And that's, I have a great relationship with my chair. I'm very, very lucky. And we communicate regularly, at least once a week. Sometimes more than that, especially due to COVID. And we've communicated multiple times in the past couple of days due to the mandate being lifted. So we have continued to talk, and we'll talk again after this meeting today in preparation for our meeting tonight. But I do work hard to make sure that I'm representing the school committee, representing the community and the parents. The school committee is my direct supervisor, and I'm always going to work to maintain a strong relationship with my school committee. I also make sure that I don't surprise my school committee. That they're, you know, if I ever think something is going to the school committee, whether it be a phone call or an email or something's going to appear on social media, I do everything I possibly can to make sure that they hear it from me first so that they're not caught off guard, because I don't want school committee members getting a phone call and not having a leg to stand on because they don't know what's happened. So I try to give them, you know, the opportunity in advance so that they're prepared if they get a phone call. As far as students, I would meet with my student rep before school committee meetings, along with the building principal potentially, if it was a school-based agenda item, to make sure that you know, we were both prepared for the meeting. And I would meet with my student cabinet. Mostly, so it can be different, I guess, because meeting with the students can sometimes be an overstep because it is different. You know, the principal to superintendency is different, but the principal to the superintendency of a career and technical high school is very different. You have a superintendent and a principal in the same building. So I would want to make sure that I'm also not overstepping what the principal's role is in the building. Right now, I don't have to worry about that. I have 7 buildings. It's not a problem. But the principal obviously is here for a reason. The principal's clearly highly qualified, as is the rest of the administrative team. I think my job is to make sure that the administrative team has what they need to be successful. and that I'm there for them, and that I support them to do their job and to make sure that they are delivering what they need to the teachers and the teachers to the students. So I would work with the principal as far as my level of involvement with, say, a student cabinet. I would like to think that I could go on occasion, but I also don't want to overstep where the principal really is in charge of the day-to-day operations of the school itself and the instructional leader. You're welcome.
So we are approaching the hour of 4:15. Brad, I'd like to thank you for coming to Shawshene today.
Thank you.
And as we wrap this up, give you the opportunity to share any closing comments you might want to make before I call this meeting to a close.
Sure. Again, just thank you for coming. We really had a great day today, meeting with the admin, meeting with the students, meeting with the staff, and also with Mr. Jackson giving me a tour. It was very, very beneficial. Had a great day. Really learned a lot, and would really look forward to the opportunity to be your next superintendent director. Really, really appreciate it. Look forward to continuing on in the process.
Great. So ladies and gentlemen, just to wrap up, I wanted to remind you that this is the second of two public parent forums for our two finalists as superintendent director. The school committee is seeking input from folks here who are present and from those who may be watching this either live or through the YouTube link. There is a feedback form on the school committee superintendent search webpage at shawtech.org. And you are encouraged to please provide feedback on that using that form. That information will be anonymous, but will be shared with all 10 members of the school committee. Their plan, as I understand it, is to conduct interviews with the two finalists during the week of beginning February 28th, after we return from February vacation. Those interviews will be in posted meetings, and then their deliberations will follow sometime after those interviews. So I encourage you to stay connected with this process. Your input is very important and valued by this committee and by this community. And with that, I thank you for your attention and wish you a pleasant good afternoon.